The day my sister decided to celebrate her 32nd birthday was the day my life cracked open in front of everyone who had always dismissed me. The backyard had been dressed like a stage, the polished wooden deck glowing under late afternoon light, the smell of grilled meat in the air, the buzz of shallow laughter filling every corner. Hannah stood at the center, her champagne glass lifted high, her laughter louder than the music. She wore a glittering dress that caught every eye, and she thrived on it. I had been in the shadows as usual, quiet, trying not to draw attention, hoping the event would end without humiliation. But Hannah leaned into the crowd, raised her glass, and with that cruel smirk she had practiced since childhood, she said, "Let us see if Grace can even walk straight today." Her words sliced the noise, and people chuckled, some looking at me, some at her, unsure whether they were supposed to laugh. My heart clenched. I wanted to turn back toward the sliding doors, but I felt the weight of 100 stares. I stepped forward. The deck looked ordinary, but under the golden light, I noticed a faint gleam, a slick shine, where the boards seemed too glossy. I should have stopped. I should have listened to that sharp pull in my stomach. But I kept walking, one step, then another, and then it happened. My foot slid, not like a small stumble, but like ice had been poured under my shoes. The next moment, my body was airborne arms, flailing hair, whipping a scream trapped in my throat. Then the crack, a sickening snap reverberated through my spine as I slammed against the hard edge near the steps. The breath was ripped out of me. I tried to push myself up, but my legs did not respond. Panic surged ice spreading through my veins. My voice came out strangled, desperate. "I cannot move my legs." The laughter that had bubbled seconds earlier froze. For a moment, silence fell heavy. I searched for eyes that would see my terror. Instead, I heard Hannah's laugh explode again. God, Grace, always the drama queen. She clutched her stomach, tears of laughter on her cheeks. The crowd hesitated. Some nervous chuckles rippled again. My body screamed in pain. Yet the absence of feeling from my waist down screamed louder. I clawed at the deck, tried to drag myself up, but my limbs betrayed me. My chest heaved. I repeated louder, "I cannot move my legs." My mother Linda stepped closer. Her face pulled into that tight smile she always wore when guests were watching. She bent down slightly, her whisper slicing me deeper than the pain. "Stop embarrassing your sister. You are just clumsy. You always were." The words punched harder than the fall. My father Charles did not move from the grill. Smoke curled around him as he flipped burgers, his voice flat and dismissive. "Get up. Do not ruin this day." I stared at them through tears, stunned by how little I mattered in that moment. I felt like I was 8 again, bleeding after Hannah shoved me onto the driveway, being told to stop crying. The same script, the same cruelty, only this time my body was broken. I tried again to lift a leg. Nothing. Terror welled so strong it blurred my vision. I gasped, "Please help me." No one moved. The crowd shifted uneasily, some sipping drinks, some glancing at Hannah, who still smirked. My humiliation turned the air thick. I wanted to scream. I wanted to vanish. The pain in my back throbbed, radiating like fire, yet my legs remained alien, silent, useless. Hannah lifted her glass again, her voice bright. "Cheers to me. Grace cannot even stay on her feet." The crowd laughed obediently, the cruelty echoing. My lips trembled. A sob rose not from weakness, but from the crushing weight of betrayal. I saw phones in hands, people recording their lenses, capturing my collapse, not as tragedy, but as entertainment. The betrayal was complete. My body lay broken, my words dismissed, and the people closest to me turned my suffering into a joke. In that instant, rage mingled with despair. A twist of realization clawed at me. This was not just an accident. This was not just clumsiness. This was Hannah's stage, and I was her sacrifice. The shock was not only in my shattered spine, but in the coldness of my family, their willingness to deny what their own eyes saw. My voice cracked. "I am serious. Please. I cannot feel anything. Still nothing but rolled eyes and mocking smiles. A memory shot through me of the countless times they had brushed me aside, each moment layering on the next, and I realized that this fall was not the beginning of my pain. It was the culmination. My vision tunneled sounds muffled the world tilting between agony and disbelief. The moment burned into my soul like a brand. My body was broken. My family laughed, and I knew nothing would ever be the same. When I was lying on that deck, unable to move all the years before, came rushing back like a storm I had tried to outrun, but never could. My family had always looked perfect from the outside. We lived in a neat suburban neighborhood in Atlanta. Our house, with its trimmed hedges and fresh paint, stood as a symbol of stability. People waved at my father Charles when he mowed the lawn, and my mother Linda always smiled politely during neighborhood gatherings. Hannah, my older sister, was the golden child everyone adored with her loud laugh, her easy charm, and her ability to make people feel like they belonged as long as they were on her side. I, Grace Miller, the younger daughter, was the shadow. Invisible until needed, visible only when I could be used as the punchline. Childhood should have been safe, but mine was a long rehearsal for humiliation. I remember the first big incident when I was about 8. Hannah shoved me into the deep end of the pool during a barbecue. I thrashed, coughing, gasping the sting of chlorine burning my nose and throat. When I scrambled out, shaking and crying, Charles clapped Hannah on the shoulder and said, "It will toughen you up." My tears earned me nothing but a glare. "If you cry, you stay inside," he barked. I swallowed my sobs, already learning that pain in our house was not to be acknowledged, at least not mine. Another time when I was 10, $20 vanished from Mom's purse. Linda looked straight at me even as Hannah avoided eye contact. "Grace, you need to admit what you did." My denial meant nothing. I was grounded for a week, my allowance docked. Later, I found Hannah buying candy with her friends, the 20 waving in her hand like a trophy. At school, I became quieter, always expecting punishment, always bracing for betrayal. At 11, I broke my arm falling off the monkey bars, except I had not fallen. Hannah had pushed me while no one was looking. The fracture was painful, the cast heavy, but the heavier weight was Mom's response. She shook her head at the emergency room, told the nurse, "She is always clumsy, always making things worse than they are." I wanted to scream the truth, but Linda's tight smile warned me not to. My father only confirmed it later at home. "Toughen up, Grace. Life is not fair. Stop making excuses." That phrase clung to me through adolescence like a second skin. Every time Hannah acted out, there was an excuse ready. She was just playful, just energetic, just being a teenager. When she broke the neighbor's window, Dad paid for it and said, "Boys will be boys," even though she was not a boy. He still used that phrase. When she screamed at teachers, Mom smoothed it over with cookies at parent-teacher meetings. When she stole a sweater from a store, the family lawyer settled it quietly. But if I so much as rolled my eyes, if I spoke up, if I dared to question the favoritism, I was called dramatic, ungrateful, disloyal. The imbalance carved itself into every corner of our home. At dinner, Hannah got the extra portion, I got the lecture. On holidays, Hannah's gifts sparkled. Mine were practical shoes, a size too big, or a sweater one size too small. I learned to wear invisibility like armor. By the time I was 15, I knew my role. I was the scapegoat, the one blamed when Hannah exploded, the one told to be quiet when Hannah lied. Charles carried his military discipline into parenting, but it only applied to me. Sit straight. Stop fidgeting. Respect your sister. He called me weak if I cried, lazy if I slept in, careless if I made mistakes. With Hannah, he laughed, he forgave, he excused. Linda perfected gaslighting. Her favorite phrase whispered into my ear whenever Hannah hurt me was, "Just let it go, sweetie." She said it so often it became a curse, a way of silencing me while pretending to be gentle. It meant, do not disrupt the peace. Do not expose the truth. Do not expect justice. By the time I left for college, I thought I had escaped. I chose design as my field because it was one area where my choices mattered, where color and shape obeyed me instead of twisting against me. I moved into a small apartment, survived on cheap noodles, and worked late nights to pay rent. For a while, the silence felt like freedom. No one told me I was clumsy. No one erased my voice. Yet the phone calls kept pulling me back. Linda's voice guilt tripped me every Thanksgiving, every birthday. Your sister misses you. Your father wants peace. Do not hold grudges. Family is everything. I would cave, drive home, sit through the charade of perfect dinners only to be mocked again by Hannah in front of relatives. Remember when you cried because of the dark Grace. Remember when you peed your bed. Laughter erupted around the table, and I would force a smile, shame burning through me. Those gatherings reminded me that my family never changed. They needed me as a backdrop, a foil, a scapegoat. The pattern was fixed, and each visit left me emptier. Still, I kept trying because deep inside, I hoped for recognition for one word of fairness. That hope was my weakness. It was why I drove to Hannah's birthday that night, gift in hand, heart heavy, but still wishing maybe this time would be different. Instead, I found myself sprawled on a slick deck spine, cracked legs, useless, and the same words thrown at me again. You are clumsy. You are dramatic. Stop embarrassing us. Only this time, the consequences were not just emotional bruises or childhood scars. This time, my body was broken, and their lies were louder than my pain. The sharp pain running down my spine mixed with the terrifying numbness in my legs, and I could not believe that nobody was rushing to my side. I remember blinking against the sunlight, expecting at least one pair of hands to help me, but instead, the sound that cut through was Hannah's laugh again, louder this time, echoing like knives. She lifted her glass, stood up on a chair, and with every ounce of cruel confidence she had carried since childhood, she shouted cheers to me. Grace cannot even stay on her feet. The crowd laughed obediently, some of them clearly unsure if they should, but still following her lead. My cheeks burned not just from pain, but from humiliation that spread across the deck like wildfire. I wanted to vanish, to disappear under the boards, but all I could do was lie there, every breath sharp and shallow. My eyes sought out my mother Linda, pleading silently, begging her to see me, to be the parent she had never been. She walked over slowly, her heels clicking, her face locked into that polite mask she always wore when others were present. She leaned down close so only I could hear her whisper, "If you love me, you will not ruin Hannah's party. Do not make a scene. You are always so dramatic." The words pierced deeper than the fracture in my back. I choked out, "Mom, please, I cannot move." But she pulled away as if my desperation was an inconvenience, adjusting her blouse as she turned back to the guests with that smile stretched too thin. My father, Charles, was still at the grill flipping burgers as if the smell of smoke and sizzling meat mattered more than his daughter on the ground. His voice, detached and dismissive, carried over the music. "Get up, Grace. You are fine. You always overreact." The disbelief made my chest tighten. I cried out again, louder, "I cannot feel my legs." Still, no one rushed to help. Some guests looked uncomfortable, shuffling, whispering, but nobody moved. One man chuckled nervously, muttering she always was sensitive. Hannah smirked, her eyes glinting with satisfaction as she raised her glass once more. "Come on, everyone. Do not let my sister's clumsiness ruin the fun." The laughter resumed louder this time, covering my sobs. The world blurred as my vision swam with tears, my body screaming silently. I clawed at the deck with my fingers, trying to drag myself, but the more I struggled, the more it seemed to feed their amusement. Inside my head, memories collided, every past humiliation stacking onto the present moment. When Hannah locked me in the crawl space at 11, and Dad said, "Stop being afraid of the dark." When she shoved me off my bike, and Mom said I should have stayed out of her way. Those phrases circled like vultures, now feeding on my brokenness. I realized nothing had changed, not a single thing. My suffering was their entertainment, their justification, their tradition. My breath came shallow and ragged. I gasped, "Please help me," but it was drowned by the crowd's laughter and the music that Hannah turned up louder, almost like a soundtrack to my despair. Someone lifted a phone and began recording, and the flash of the camera stung worse than the sun. I was no longer a daughter or a sister. I was content for their mockery. The cruelty of it tore me apart. My arms trembled with effort, my voice cracked, but still I begged. "I am serious. I cannot feel anything." Linda passed by, again, carrying a tray of glasses, not even looking at me. Her words floated down like poison sweetened with sugar. "Just get up, Grace. Stop embarrassing us. If you care about this family, you will stay quiet." That was the script I had heard my whole life, and here it was again, even when my body was broken on the ground. My father's tone sharpened when I cried out again. "Grace, enough. You are ruining this day. Stand up or leave." His indifference was worse than shouting. He did not even look at me. He flipped another burger, the sizzle covering my sobs. I thought I might black out from the weight of betrayal. The gaslighting was total absolute. I was not just dismissed, I was erased. Every plea, every cry met with ridicule or silence. Hannah posed for a photo with her friends, laughing, her eyes flicking toward me as if to ensure I was still suffering at her feet. The guests clapped at some joke she made about me, though I could not even process the words. My ears rang, my body was foreign, my family was united in their refusal to acknowledge the truth. I realized in that crushing moment that they would rather protect the illusion of Hannah's perfect birthday than admit their younger daughter was paralyzed in front of them. That revelation was more devastating than the injury itself. The deck under my hands felt hard and unforgiving, and so did every face around me. For a split second, the world slowed, the laughter turning muffled, the smoke from the grill curling above my father like a cloud of denial. My mother's eyes flicked toward me only when she was sure no one else was looking, and even then her gaze carried no love, only warning. Be quiet. Stay invisible. That was the family creed, and it was killing me as surely as the injury spreading numbness through my body. I whispered once more, "Help me," and felt the crushing silence press down. Just when the humiliation felt unbearable and my mind was preparing to surrender to the numbness crawling up my body, a new voice cut through the music and the laughter. It was sharp, authoritative, filled with urgency. "Back up! I am a nurse!" For a moment, the crowd froze as if someone had finally shattered the spell of Hannah's stage. The woman pushed her way forward, a plastic cup still in one hand, her scrubs wrinkled from what must have been a long shift. She dropped to her knees beside me, her eyes fierce, her movements fast. I felt her hands on my shoulders, steady but firm. "Do not move." She ordered, her voice low enough for me, but loud enough for the crowd to hear. "Tell me where the pain is." My voice cracked lower back. I cannot feel my legs. She pressed carefully along my spine, her fingers skilled and clinical. When she reached a point near my hip, a jolt of pain shot through me so strong I nearly blacked out. She looked up, fury written across her face. "He needs an ambulance now," she shouted, though I heard the word he instead of she in the chaos of her urgency. The guests shifted their weight, glancing at each other unsure. Hannah laughed nervously. It was just a prank, she slipped, no big deal. The nurse snapped her head toward her eyes blazing. "You poured oil on the deck. That is not a prank. That is reckless." Hannah stuttered for a second, her smug smile faltering. I did not think she would actually fall like that." The nurse stood straight for a second, towering over Hannah. "Somebody call 911. Well, one now. If you delay this any longer, you are complicit." The word complicit sliced through the crowd, and people suddenly realized this was no longer entertainment. Silence swept the backyard. Phones that had been raised to record dropped down, hands fumbling. The nurse pointed at a man holding his phone. "You call now." He hesitated, then quickly dialed. The air changed from amusement to dread. My mother Linda stepped forward, her voice trembling but still coated in that poisonous sugar. "We do not need an ambulance," she said too quickly. "People will gossip. This is Hannah's day." The nurse turned on her, her tone sharp like broken glass. "Your daughter cannot move her legs, and you are worried about gossip. Are you insane?" The words cut so deep I saw Linda's face blanch, her mouth opening and closing without words. For the first time in years, someone had confronted her, and she had nothing to hide behind. My father Charles dropped his tongs, finally looking up from the grill, his brows knit together but his expression still distant. "Is it really that serious?" he asked, as if hoping the nurse would say no so he could return to his burgers. She glared at him. "Yes, it is that serious. She has spinal trauma." She could lose her ability to walk if not treated immediately. Call them now. The crowd had shifted fully now from laughing spectators to uneasy witnesses. Some whispered, others shook their heads. I saw Hannah's hands tremble, though she tried to hide it behind her champagne glass. My chest rose with shallow breaths, relief mixing with terror. Someone finally saw me not as a clown, not as clumsy, not as dramatic, but as a patient in need of urgent care. The nurse crouched again by my side, her eyes softening. Stay awake, do not move, help is coming. Her hand squeezed mine, grounding me as tears spilled hot and silent down my cheeks. For the first time in hours, maybe in years, I felt the weight of truth pressing down. Not the lies my family used to bury me, but truth acknowledged out loud in front of everyone. Hannah's face twisted. She tried to salvage her performance. Come on, it was just for fun. Everyone slips sometimes. The nurse snapped again. Do you have any idea what spinal cord damage means? This is not fun. This is life-changing. The crowd recoiled as if her words carried a physical force. I heard sirens in the distance, faint but growing. My mother backed away as if I were contagious, her eyes darting toward the neighbors whispering about her. My father muttered something under his breath, but he no longer looked certain. Hannah bit her lip, her bravado slipping as the nurse barked more orders. Clear space, give them room. Move the chairs. The once rowdy backyard fell into a tense silence broken only by the sound of sirens drawing closer. My body still lay useless, but my mind clung to the nurse's presence. She had turned the entire narrative with a few words. She had forced them to see what they tried to ignore. That was the twist my life had been waiting for, not just the injury, but the witness who refused to let it be dismissed. As the gate creaked open and paramedics rushed in, I realized that my family's fortress of denial had its first crack, and through it, the truth was finally seeping. The ride in the ambulance blurred into fragments of flashing lights and oxygen masks and voices I could barely follow. The pain came in waves like fire radiating from my lower back, while my legs lay still cold and foreign, as if they no longer belonged to me. I tried to shift, but the straps held me down, and every movement sent shock after shock up my spine. The nurse Angela rode with me, her hand steady on my arm, her voice a lifeline. Stay with me, Grace. Keep breathing, you are not alone. Her words anchored me as the siren screamed above us. When the doors burst open at the hospital, fluorescent lights poured over me and masked faces surrounded my stretcher. The smell of antiseptic stung my nose. The rush of machines filled my ears. They wheeled me into a trauma room, cutting off my clothes in seconds, sticking needles into my arm, placing monitors on my chest. I wanted to ask if I would ever walk again, but my throat felt locked shut. A doctor with sharp eyes and dark hair leaned close, her voice calm but firm. Grace, you have suffered a spinal fracture with compression on your spinal cord. The delay in getting you here may have worsened the injury. We will do everything we can, but you need to know this is very serious. The words drilled into me. Fracture. Compression. Delay. Serious. My heart thudded so hard I thought it might break free from my chest. My voice trembled. Are you saying I am paralyzed? She did not flinch. Right now there is no motor function below the waist. It is too early to know the full outcome. We will monitor swelling, but yes, at this moment you cannot walk. My world spun and the room closed in. I stared at the ceiling tiles, each square a reminder of how fragile life had become. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. Silent tears slid down my temples into my hair. Angela squeezed my hand, whispering, "You are strong. Grace, do not give up." I clung to her voice like driftwood in a storm. The X-ray images appeared on a monitor. Dark lines of bone lit up with a fracture near the lumbar region. The doctor pointed to the compression, explaining how the spinal cord was pinched, how time was crucial, how damage could be permanent. The images were undeniable, proof carved in black and white. I thought of every time my mother had told me I was too sensitive, every time my father said, "Get up and toughen up," every time Hannah laughed when I fell. None of their words could erase what these images showed. My injury was real, undeniable, unfixable by denial. That realization was a twist as sharp as the fracture itself. For years, I doubted my own body, my own truth, because they taught me to. But now a machine revealed the years of lies. Angela leaned close, her eyes fierce. Grace, this is not your fault. Remember that. You did not do this to yourself. Someone else did. My lips trembled. I whispered, my sister poured oil. Angela nodded. And now it is documented. That word, documented, echoed like a promise. For once, I was not crazy, not clumsy, not dramatic. I was a victim with evidence. I drifted in and out as nurses adjusted IV drips and the doctor explained surgical options, but the shock kept me numb. Hours passed before they moved me to a quieter room, but the silence pressed heavy. I stared at the ceiling, remembering every dismissal from my childhood. When Hannah locked me in the crawl space, Dad said, "Stop being afraid of the dark." When she pushed me off my bike, Mom said you should have stayed out of her way. When she stole money, they blamed me. Now here I was with a shattered spine, and still their voices rang in my ears, calling me clumsy, dramatic, embarrassing. Yet the X-ray glowed back at me like a shield. The abuse was written into my bones, into the images no one could deny. A nurse adjusted my blanket, asked if I was comfortable. I laughed bitterly. Comfortable. My body was broken. My family absent, and yet for the first time I felt a strange sliver of vindication. The truth was visible and recorded. Angela came back in later with a cup of water. She told me quietly the police would want a statement. She said she would be there when I spoke. Her presence steadied me. She was proof that not everyone turned away. I closed my eyes, exhaustion tugging, but before I drifted, I thought this injury may have broken me physically, but it also broke their lie that I was only clumsy. The X-ray proved years of abuse written in silence across my life. Now the silence was ending. The following morning, the fluorescent lights of the hospital room felt harsher than the night before, and the ache in my back had sharpened into a constant reminder that nothing would ever be the same. I lay in bed, half propped up by pillows, when the door opened and 2 officers stepped in their uniforms, crisp their notebooks ready. One introduced himself as Detective Raymond Scott, his voice steady with that practiced calm that both reassures and unsettles. He said they had already spoken with Nurse Angela, who reported the incident as suspected reckless endangerment. I nodded, my throat dry, my heart racing. He asked me to tell him in my own words what happened. I swallowed hard, remembering the slick shine on the deck, the mocking smile on Hannah's face, the laughter that followed my fall. My sister poured oil on the deck. I said each word deliberate. She called it a prank, but she knew I would slip. I told them how I screamed, that I could not feel my legs, how my parents told me to stop being dramatic, how no one moved until Angela intervened. Detective Scott wrote quickly, his pen scratching across paper. He asked if there had been previous incidents of mistreatment in the family. My chest tightened as memories flooded. Years of being blamed, years of being silenced, years of Hannah hurting me with impunity. I told him about being locked in the crawl space, about the broken arm, blamed on clumsiness, about stolen money pinned on me. His eyes narrowed, not in disbelief, but in recognition. He had seen patterns like this before. He asked if I had ever reported it. I shook my head. I said who would have believed me when my own parents laughed at me. He looked at me for a long moment, then said quietly, "The X-rays and the witness statement change everything. My mother and father will also be interviewed." At that moment, a chill ran through me because I already knew how they would respond. They would deny, deflect, accuse me of being attention-seeking. They had done it my entire life. But Detective Scott's presence, his seriousness, made it clear that this time their words would not carry the same power. Later that day, an assistant district attorney came by a woman named Clark, her suit neat, her expression sharp. She explained that based on the nurse's testimony and the medical evidence, charges were being prepared. Hannah could face reckless endangerment, possibly aggravated assault. My parents could face charges of neglect because they ignored my pleas while I lay injured. The idea of my family being investigated by law enforcement should have made me feel conflicted, but all I felt was a grim satisfaction. For years, they had treated me as invisible, now the law saw me. I whispered almost to myself, they always said I was clumsy. The ADA looked straight at me and replied, "Clumsy does not shatter a spine with oil on the deck." That line seared into me more powerful than anything I had ever heard from my parents. The legal machine moved quickly. Officers returned later saying they had spoken with Hannah. She admitted to pouring oil but insisted it was only for shine, not to hurt me. When asked if she laughed afterward, she shrugged, said, "Grace always makes things bigger than they are." Linda repeated the same words, telling investigators I was overreacting, that I was embarrassed about falling. Charles said I always sought attention. Their script never changed, but now it was exposed for what it was. Detective Scott told me Angela's testimony carried weight. Multiple guests also confirmed hearing Hannah call it a prank. Some admitted unease at my parents' reactions. Slowly, the fortress they had built around Hannah's behavior was cracking under the weight of external scrutiny. That night alone in my hospital bed, I stared at the ceiling, my body heavy and foreign, but my mind alert. For the first time in my life, someone outside my family was calling their lies into question. The thought was almost too big to process. Tears rolled down my cheeks, hot with both relief and grief. Relief that the truth was finally visible. Grief that it had taken paralysis for anyone to listen. The next morning, Detective Scott returned, saying the district attorney had approved preliminary charges. Hannah would be arrested soon. My parents would be summoned for further questioning. He asked if I wanted to pursue a civil case alongside the criminal one. The idea burned through me. For years, they had taken from me my dignity, my childhood, my peace. Now I could take back something tangible. "Yes," I said firmly, my voice shaking but certain. "Yes, I want to go after them all." Detective Scott nodded, said he would connect me with an attorney experienced in civil injury suits. His words felt like a key unlocking a door I never thought I could open. When he left, I closed my eyes and inhaled deeply. The pain in my body was sharp, but beneath it, a new feeling stirred, one I had never allowed myself before. Hope. The law was on my side, and for once their laughter, their denial, their dismissal could not erase what had been proven. The twist was unfolding, not just that I was broken, but that their lies were breaking too, and the world was finally watching. 2 days after Detective Scott's visit, I met attorney Rachel Gomez for the first time. She walked into my hospital room carrying a thick folder under her arm, her stride confident, her voice clipped, and no nonsense. "Grace, I have reviewed the police report," she said, her tone sharp. "Your sister admitted pouring oil on the deck. Multiple witnesses heard you ask for help. The nurse documented everything. This is a strong case." I listened, my chest tight, my body still heavy beneath the blankets. She pulled out forms explaining that the criminal process would run its course, but I could file civil actions as well. "We are going after them all," she said firmly. "Not just your sister, but your parents for negligence and years of emotional abuse." The words sent a strange mix of relief and fear through me. My family had always been untouchable in my mind, but now the law was peeling back their shield. I whispered, "Do it. They have ruined me for years." Rachel nodded and set the papers on my tray. "Sign here to authorize representation." My hand trembled as I scrawled my name across the line. In that moment, I crossed an invisible threshold. I was no longer just their scapegoat. I was a plaintiff. I was someone demanding accountability. Within a week, civil suits were filed. Against Hannah for assault and reckless endangerment. Against Linda and Charles for negligence and deliberate emotional harm. The news traveled fast in our community. Headlines ran in the local paper. "Family turned criminals after daughter's X-ray revealed abuse." The article included images of my X-rays, the black and white evidence of the fracture. Neighbors who once smiled politely at my parents now whispered about them in grocery aisles. For once, the shame did not belong to me. Rachel explained the process patiently. First, we would claim against the homeowner's insurance for the unsafe condition. Then, we would pursue personal assets. My parents' house, their savings, their pensions. The idea of stripping them of what they cherished most made my stomach churn, but also filled me with a grim sense of justice. For years, they paraded that house as proof of their perfect family. Now it would be sold not as a trophy, but as restitution. Meanwhile, the criminal case advanced. Hannah was officially charged. She tried to downplay it, writing a letter to the judge calling it a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. The judge did not bite. During a preliminary hearing, I was wheeled into court, my body strapped upright in a chair. Hannah smirked across the room as if daring me to speak. When the prosecutor laid out the evidence, her smile faltered. The nurse's testimony was read aloud, detailing how I lay paralyzed while my family mocked me. The X-rays were shown on a large screen. Gasps filled the courtroom. For the first time, I saw Hannah look away. My parents sat stiff in the gallery, Linda clutching Charles's hand, their faces masks of denial. Rachel leaned over and whispered, "They cannot bury this anymore." After the hearing, she told me the insurance company had already offered the policy limit. $1 million. It would cover immediate medical bills and part of long-term care. I nodded but told her it was not enough. I wanted more, not just money, but acknowledgement of the years of harm. "Burn it down," I said, my voice shaking with both fear and determination. She smiled grimly. "We will," and she did. Papers were filed to seize personal property. The house listed for sale, bank accounts frozen, retirement funds redirected into a medical trust for my care. When my parents found out, they called the hospital demanding to speak to me. I refused. Their voices had silenced me for decades. Now their silence would be forced upon them. Hannah's lawyer tried to negotiate, offering a reduced sentence if we dropped the civil suit. Rachel refused. She told the court my client deserves justice, not bargains. Word spread quickly. Former neighbors came forward with stories of seeing Hannah bully me as a child. Old teachers remembered the imbalance. The pattern was undeniable. The civil case gained strength with every testimony. At night in my hospital room, I stared at the ceiling, still unable to feel my legs, but I felt a fire in my chest. For the first time, I was not powerless. The lawsuits were not just legal steps. They were my rebellion, my resistance, my declaration that I would not be erased. Rachel visited again weeks later, telling me the house had been sold. The perfect colonial brick home gone. My parents moved into a small apartment near the interstate, stripped of their pride. Hannah grew desperate, her smirk replaced by fear. The lawsuits had done what my pleas never could. They had turned the tables. The scapegoat had become the accuser. The twist was not only that I was paralyzed, but that their world was collapsing while mine was slowly being rebuilt. The day of the trial arrived with a sky heavy and gray, as if the world itself understood what was about to unfold. I was wheeled into the courthouse, the sound of my chair echoing against the polished floor, while people turned their heads to watch. Inside the courtroom, the air buzzed with whispers, reporters lined the benches. Neighbors leaned forward, hungry for spectacle. But this time, the spectacle was not me being mocked at a party. It was my family finally being forced to face the truth. When Hannah was led in, wearing a simple dress, her wrists cuffed, her chin lifted defiantly, she still managed to twist her mouth into a smirk. "Grace still milking it, huh?" she muttered loud enough for the rows around her to hear. A shiver ran through the crowd, some gasping at her audacity, others shaking their heads. My heart pounded, but Rachel placed a hand on my arm, steadying me. "Do not let her see your fear," she whispered. Then the prosecutor began presenting the case. The X-rays appeared on a giant screen, glowing like undeniable proof. The fracture in my spine visible to every eye in the room. The prosecutor explained how Hannah deliberately poured oil onto the deck, calling it a prank, how I immediately lost the ability to move my legs, how my pleas for help were ignored. The nurse. Angela took the stand, her voice fierce and unwavering as she described finding me unable to move, how she screamed for an ambulance while my mother insisted it was gossip and my father flipped burgers. Every word struck the courtroom like hammer blows. Hannah's smirk flickered. Linda began to cry softly in the gallery, clutching Charles's arm, whispering frantic prayers. When it was my turn to testify, the bailiff wheeled me forward. My hands trembled, but my voice found a strength I did not know I had. I told them about the moment of the fall, the crack in my back, the numbness spreading. I told them how Hannah laughed, standing on a chair to toast to my humiliation. I told them how my mother bent down only to whisper that I should not ruin Hannah's day, how my father barked at me to get up. My words quivered, but they rang true, and I saw jurors nod their faces hard with outrage. When Rachel asked what I felt in that moment, I answered with tears streaming down my cheeks. Not just pain, not just terror, but betrayal, worse than any injury. The courtroom fell silent. The judge cleared his throat, the weight of the silence pressing down. The defense attempted to spin Hannah's actions as youthful recklessness gone wrong, a prank without malice. But the evidence was too strong, the testimonies too damning. Then came the moment that sealed everything. Linda was called to the stand. She wept, her shoulders shaking, begging the court to understand that she had been under stress, that she had tried her best. She dropped to her knees at one point, crying, "She is my baby. Please do not send her to prison." The judge's gavel slammed down. Silence. The court does not bow to crocodile tears, he declared, his voice booming. The gallery gasped, some murmuring agreement. The verdict was delivered with a finality that rang through my bones. Hannah Miller, guilty of reckless assault with serious bodily harm, sentenced to 3 years in prison, followed by probation. Linda and Charles Miller, guilty of reckless disregard during a medical emergency, sentenced to 200 hours of community service each with financial penalties and the loss of their remaining assets into a trust for my care. Gasps filled the room as the bailiff stepped behind Hannah, clicking the cuffs around her wrists. She laughed one last time, a brittle, hollow sound, but the smirk no longer reached her eyes. She was led out while cameras flashed, capturing her fall from grace. My mother collapsed into sobs, clutching at the bench, reaching toward the judge as if begging for mercy. My father stared straight ahead, jaw tight, his face a mask of rage and humiliation. The judge ignored their cries. Justice had spoken. The courtroom exhaled a collective breath, the tension breaking. I sat in my wheelchair, shaking not from fear, but from release. For the first time in my life, the scales had tipped in my favor. Reporters scribbled headlines, neighbors whispered, but all I heard was the judge's words echoing in my mind. Guilty. The twist that no one expected, not me, not Hannah, not Linda or Charles, was that the family who always painted me as weak, dramatic, clumsy, was now exposed as criminally negligent, reckless abusers of their own daughter. They lost the image they had guarded for decades, and the world saw them for what they truly were. When the bailiff wheeled me out into the hallway, Rachel leaned close and said, "This does not fix your spine, but they cannot pretend it never happened." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. The verdict was not just about punishment. It was recognition. It was the validation that every scar, every humiliation, every betrayal had been real. The scapegoat had finally been heard. After the trial, the weight of the verdict still echoed in my chest, but the hardest part had only just begun, because while the law had given me recognition, my body still carried the damage every second of every day. The rehabilitation center became my new battlefield, its walls painted in calm colors that did nothing to soften the brutal truth of what recovery required. My first session started with a physical therapist named Eric, who looked at me with no pity, only determination. "We are going to push hard," he said, "and you are going to hate me some days, but this is the only way forward." Within 20 minutes of trying to engage my core muscles, I vomited into a trash can from the strain. I was humiliated, but Eric only handed me a towel and said, "Half the guys here do that on the first day, we call it baptism." His bluntness stung, but it also kept me grounded. I showed up day after day, sweating through pain that seemed unbearable. My arms shook as I tried to pull myself from the chair to the mat. My hands blistered from gripping parallel bars. My back ached until tears blurred my vision. But slowly, painfully, progress came. First, I could sit without help, then shift my weight from side to side. Weeks later, I felt a flicker in my thighs like water dripping across skin. Eric refused to celebrate until I could repeat it twice. "Progress is not luck," he said, "it is earned." His words burned into me and fueled every grimace, every groan, every scream muffled into my pillow at night. During this time, Ethan Walker, my neighbor, stepped into my life in ways I never expected. He started by bringing over meals, saying he hated leftovers, but I knew it was his quiet way of helping. He never pitied me, he just sat beside me talking about simple things like his work or television shows. His presence reminded me I was still part of the world, not just a patient trapped in cycles of therapy. Sometimes he drove me to sessions when I was too exhausted to navigate on my own. One evening, after a brutal day of exercises when I collapsed onto my couch crying, he simply handed me a cup of tea and said, "You do not have to be strong every minute, Grace." That sentence pierced deeper than any drill in therapy because no one in my family had ever given me permission to feel weak. I began therapy sessions with Melissa, a trauma specialist I had first refused but later realized I needed. She listened patiently for weeks before asking about my family. When I finally told her, she leaned back and said, "So they never actually saw you, did they?" That line cut sharper than a knife. They had never seen me as anything but a prop in Hannah's show, a scapegoat to absorb blame, a shadow to make Hannah shine brighter. But Melissa helped me untangle the knots inside my chest. She guided me to see that my worth was not measured by their recognition. Slowly, I began to release the guilt that had chained me for decades. At the center, the milestones grew. I stood for the first time with braces, my arms shaking, sweat pouring down my face. I took 6 steps before collapsing onto the mat again. Eric clapped like I had won a marathon. My heart thundered, but I felt alive. At home, I transformed my apartment with settlement money counters, lowered grab bars, installed voice-activated lights. For once, I could move around without crawling or begging for help. The independence felt like freedom. I also began sharing parts of my story online, hesitant at first, but the response stunned me. Strangers from across the country wrote messages of support, telling me I was brave, telling me my story gave them strength to face their own families. For years, my voice had been silenced. Now it carried beyond the walls of my childhood home. The twist of recovery was not only physical, but emotional. Every day, I rebuilt pieces of myself, not just muscles and nerves, but self-respect and trust. Ethan kept showing up, bringing meals, making me laugh, reminding me that companionship did not have to hurt. Melissa kept challenging me to face memories without letting them define me. Eric kept pushing my body past limits I thought impossible. Slowly, the circle around me grew from one of ridicule to one of genuine support. I still had nights when anger consumed me, when I slammed my fist against the counter after dropping something, when I cried into my pillow remembering the laughter of that party. But now, the anger did not drown me. It fueled me to keep moving forward. 2 months after the verdict, Eric handed me a pair of custom crutches with red handles. "You earned these," he said. My chest swelled with pride as I walked 15 feet without sitting down. Slow, awkward, trembling, but each step was a declaration. They had broken my spine, but not my will. Every movement proved that. At the center, I began mentoring new patients, telling them life was not over. Just different, harder, yes, but not finished. Watching their eyes light up reminded me that pain could be transformed into purpose. For the first time, I believed that my future was not defined by the past. The recovery journey was brutal and unending, but within it lay my victory. 2 years after that fall, I sat in my apartment on a quiet Tuesday morning, sunlight pouring through wide windows that I had chosen deliberately so I would never feel trapped in the dark again. On the counter lay a letter postmarked from the prison where Hannah was serving her sentence. My hands trembled as I opened it, curiosity battling with dread. The handwriting was neat, careful words strung together in a tone I had rarely heard from her. She admitted to everything. She wrote that she had started therapy in prison, that it began as mandatory, but she kept going voluntarily. She listed every memory I thought she had long forgotten: the crawl space, the broken bike, the birthday ruined by cruel pranks, the laughter that had cut deeper than any wound. She admitted that she wanted people to laugh at me, not at her. She admitted that she did not know how to stop being the person who ruined things. She asked for forgiveness, though she said she had not forgiven herself. I read each line, feeling my chest tighten. When I finished, I folded the letter into a small block of paper and set it aside. Melissa, my therapist, asked later if I planned to respond. Maybe someday, I told her, but not now, and maybe not ever. Because a letter does not erase years of scars. It does not give me my legs back. It does not give me a childhood where I was seen. And it does not erase the silence of my parents. The last I heard of Linda and Charles was from a cousin who said they had moved to a gated community in Arizona, selling off what little remained of their pride. My mother posted a photo on social media captioned "Fresh start in the desert, peace and sunshine," with no mention of me or of Hannah or of the lawsuits that stripped them. They pretended none of it ever happened. Strangely, it no longer cut the way it once would have. I no longer needed their recognition. I no longer longed for their approval. I no longer lost sleep wondering what version of myself might have made them love me. I realized that closure does not come from people who never showed up in the first place. Closure came when I stopped waiting. My energy turned to building something real. I established a small foundation funded by part of the settlement money to support survivors of family abuse who were left voiceless like me. Each month, we hosted meetings at the community center where women and men told their stories without fear of being called dramatic or clumsy. When I wheeled into those rooms and shared my own journey, the nods of understanding, the tears of recognition filled the void my family had left. Ethan stayed in my life not as a savior, but as a steady presence. Sometimes he brought over takeout after his shifts. Sometimes we just sat on the balcony watching the sky turn from orange to blue without words. It was slow, unpressured, real. He saw me not as broken, but as whole. Eric still texted me ridiculous memes from the rehab gym, and Melissa still handed me book recommendations she knew I would argue about just to make me laugh. Angela, the nurse, visited once bringing cookies and hugging me so tightly I thought my ribs might crack. "You are alive," she said, "and that is everything." My circle was small but solid, and for the first time in my life I was surrounded by people who saw me. Physically, I continued to fight. With braces and crutches, I could walk short distances, each step awkward but triumphant. Sometimes I fell, but I always got back up. Each stumble reminded me that resilience was not about never falling, it was about refusing to stay down. The twist that once felt like tragedy became the foundation of a new identity. My family's cruelty had broken my spine, but it had also broken the illusion that I needed their love to matter. Now I knew better. I mattered because I existed, because I fought, because I survived. One morning, I walked across my apartment with the red-handled crutches Eric had given me, and I felt something I had never felt at home growing up. Pride. Real, untainted pride. I looked at the mirror and whispered, "They broke my spine, but not my spirit." For the first time, I am free. That sentence echoed through me like a song I had been waiting my whole life to hear. My story had become more than survival. It was a message. To anyone who had been silenced by family gaslighting, to anyone who had been told they were clumsy when in truth they were victims, to anyone who had been erased so that others could shine. I wanted them to know that evidence can shatter lies, that resilience can rebuild lives, that justice, though delayed, can still arrive with clarity. As I closed the chapter on the Millers, I opened another for myself. I was no longer the scapegoat. I was a woman who had faced betrayal, humiliation, injury, and still found a way to rise. And though my steps were slow and aided, they were mine. At the end of every community meeting, I repeated the same words, and they felt like a benediction. They broke my body, but they did not break me. And finally, the world sees me. Then I asked the question that invited others to step forward with their truth. What would you do if your own family betrayed you? Share your story.